Hello. Welcome to this candidate debate sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Marin County. I'm Laurie Nardone of the League of Women Voters of Marin County, and also with us is Margie Eller as timekeeper. The candidates with us today are running for a 4-year term for State Senator, District 2. The candidates with us today are Derek Knell, Harry Lehmann, Mike McGuire, and Lawrence Weisner. The candidates have been invited to make opening statements of 2 minutes. We'll begin with Derek Knell, then Harry Lehmann, then Mike McGuire, and Lawrence Weisner. Derek?
Sure. Well, first I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for presenting this forum. It's a great opportunity for voters to get a chance to hear what the candidates have to say on the issues, and I appreciate the opportunity very much. I'm running for state senator because I want the state's focus to be serving the interests of everyday Californians. With the loss of moderate candidates in both parties, voters have been presented with extreme candidates whose primary interest is to serve the full agenda and the political parties and special interest groups from whom they associate. Such political affiliation has resulted in candidates whose central focus is to keep their party's power and control over elections by whitewashing concerns and propagating division amongst voters. They also like to redirect attention to unrelated issues and rather than the problems that the state needs to focus on. It's time for a new approach and the focus on the interests of everyday Californians. Voters deserve candidates who can be objective and are willing to admit that their party is wrong when it supports laws that are designed to benefit the special interest from which they are aligned. My experience as a third-term school board trustee and a business owner for 21 years has given me a firsthand and sensible, unique approach and understanding of both the public and private sector. With this experience, and as your state senator, I will work to create fair and reasonable legislation, putting the everyday interests of Californians first. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have prepared remarks. I'm a candidate without a net in that sense. I'm a trial lawyer by long background, 35 years, and those have involved some cases of some historic consequence I won't attempt to articulate here. They've also involved dealing with helping people, which is really what it's all about, in their times of greatest distress. And as I think about the question you've asked, or the opportunity we have here for opening statements, I would say that I'm very deeply saddened by what I see in California government today. I agree with what Derek Knell just said about the extent to which party politics have completely taken over the situation. Party loyalty has completely taken over the situation. Power hunger has been a very major factor in what's happened with the Democratic Party in California. As they have had complete control of the legislature, has illustrated the old adage, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I think that, I feel very much like a person with some skills who comes around a bend in the mountains, perhaps, up there fishing, and sees an accident scene. And the question is, does he or she stop at that accident scene and render aid? And I feel that if I offer myself for public service here, then win or lose, I'll know that I've tried to help, and so I'm running. I'll answer specific questions about specific issues as they develop. I certainly agree that the excessive control of the public employee unions is a major factor. I also remain concerned about EMF issues, which I hope to get a chance to address. Check out greenswan.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you so much, Laurie. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and Marin TV for hosting this, and it's an honor to be here with my fellow candidates, and thank you so much for watching. I'd like to be able to provide you a little bit of background about myself, where I've been, and where I would be honored to work with you into the future. My mom and dad divorced when I was very young. My grandma took both my mom and myself in and got us back on our feet financially. Rightfully so. I was expected to start working very early. I've been working since I was a junior in high school full-time at 16 years old. I worked in the radio and television industries, and I helped put myself through college. I come to this position with more than a decade of small business management experience. I was elected to the Healdsburg School Board at the age of 19 and led the effort to rebuild decaying schools. I was the youngest mayor in the city of Healdsburg's history and helped build one of the most successful local economies in our region. And I currently serve on the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors. I'm the only one in this race that has brought forward pension reform. Our historic pension reform agreements will save taxpayers over $170 million. And I'm running for state senate because there is no greater entity in the state of California that impacts our schools, communities, and our counties. Marin County needs a representative that is going to stand strong, be active, involved, and deliver the resources our local communities need to thrive. I would like to be able to lay out my priorities, and my priorities are as follows. First of all, we must focus on job and economic initiatives with a special emphasis on small businesses. We must reinvest in public education, making sure that our public schools are thriving. We must deliver responsible budgets, focusing on pension reform, paying down our bond debt, and rebuilding our rainy day fund. We also must focus on an ethics reform package, as well as protecting our environment. I have a strong track record of protecting our coastline. We must ban fracking in this state and reopen our state parks. I'd be honored to have your support.
Thank you, Mike. Lawrence.
Well, my fellow Californians, you've heard from three, and you're now about to hear from the fourth candidate for this office. I wish to thank the League also for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. You know, we're at a point of decision again in this race. 4 years ago, we had a choice to make, and we made our choices, and we have gotten what we got. And it's a sad thing in my estimation that, you know, after 4 years, really, the things that I pointed out 4 years ago are still germane to this race today. You know, we still suffer from unemployment ahead of the state, the national average. The nation is down to 6.3, I understand now, and we're standing at 8.2. Our budgets are supposed to be in balance, but if they have to take money from funds to pay interest on money that we borrowed from the federal government for other funds, and we increase our debt, our short-term debt annually. I think it's an increase of $14.7 billion this year, and we had to carry over $2.5 billion from last year, which doesn't sound good to me. And our education, there's nothing much happening there as well. We're down at the bottom level of the states in the performance of our students. So the same things I brought up last time, I'm bringing up again this time. So let's reflect when you go to the polls. Think about where we are now, think about where we were, and think about where you want to be. And then decide who would be your best candidate to take the state and to take our district to that place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lawrence. So we now have a series of questions, and each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond. We're going to start with Harry Lehmann and then go around the table for each person to have the chance to answer. Appreciate your being here today. So the first question is, and some of you touched on this just now, but how have your experiences prepared you for this job? Harry?
Well, I left politics in the mid-1970s after I should say, I lost the best friend of my high school years to a suicide. He had 800s on both sides of his SATs, October 9th, 1969, and that was responsive to the felony marijuana arrests he'd had for very small amounts. But they were career ruining right then, and when Peter died, I promised that when I was a lawyer, I would change that law, and I was a leading person, led the team of lawyers, young lawyers, the A-team we called them from USF, who were the primary lobby effort in support of George Moscone's Senate Bill 95. That was a long fight. I was personally responsible for bringing in the last vote at the last minute, and that changed California's marijuana laws from their then felony to their misdemeanor status. I consider that to be one of the best humanitarian things I have accomplished. I was president of the student body at both of the colleges that I attended during difficult times, San Francisco State and the College of Marin. And I have now practiced law for 35 years and have had to deal with all kinds of human issues, all kinds of scientific issues, which is my specialty area. And I think that what's missing in government right now is the approaching of problems on the basis of facts. Right now, the way problems are being addressed, everyone asks, well, who said it? The question's not who said it, the question is what was said. We need factual analysis with regard to problem solution, and I promise to provide that, and I promise to be completely honorable in all things that I do and say.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you, Laurie. So what has prepared me through my experiences for this position? There are 4 areas I'd like to be able to focus in on. First of all is jobs. When I was first elected to the Board of Supervisors, and it was in the depths of the recession, Sonoma County had lost 25,000 jobs. I brought forward our economic recovery plan that helped make Sonoma County #1 in the state of California in job growth. And that's what we need in the North Bay and North Coast. 2, I'd like to focus on education. I'm a former school board president. I had led the effort that was successful that rebuilt decaying schools. I'm co-founder of the Career Technology Education Fund that's raised over $1 million for career skills and job skill programming in our public high schools. And as a member of the Board of Supervisors, I brought forward the policy that is now investing in crisis counselors in our local public high schools. I have the experience we need to be able to reinvest and turn our public schools around. 3, budgets. One of my top priorities was to turn our budget around in the county of Sonoma. We had to cut $100 million, and after years of deficits, we now have a $10 million surplus. And I've also been able to bring forward pension reform that's going to save taxpayers $170 million over the next 10 years. And we did it by bringing people together. And finally, the environment. I have a track record, and I'm a champion for environmental protection. I focus on coastal protection. I have been absolutely focused on the drought and making sure that our region has the water supply we need to thrive in the years to come. And I've also worked on keeping our state parks open. Thank you.
Well, in experience, I am a certified public accountant. And my understanding is, in talking to the State Society in California here, there are no accountants currently seated in the legislature, either in the Assembly or the Senate. So I would take a long overdue position of an accountant in the legislative office. Now, is that necessary? I believe it is. One thing that we're trained as auditors in our profession is that we go out and we analyze and we try to understand what's going on and then bring to the situation clarity and understanding so that we can develop programs that are essential in order to overcome some of the difficulties we have. We still have a financial difficulty in the state of California. 4 years ago when I ran, Phil Angelizzi was warning the legislature that in order to prudently fund our debt, we need to keep the funding down to about 6% of our general fund. And at that time we were approaching 12. Lord knows where we are today. But we need common sense approaches to our problems. We need to join with our neighbor state, Colorado, and develop a certain plan, like the GAN plan, that we only spend so much of the money we receive, not everything that we receive, and beyond that, and borrowing today our future so that we can pay our current debts. That's a very bad way to go. I will bring that experience to our legislature.
Thank you, Lawrence. Derek?
Well, I think this question about what gives us experience to be a state senator is somewhat a test to our character and what type of individual we are. And one of the main reasons I'm running is I think that Sacramento has too many politicians who are interested in working for and are obligated or beholden to special interest. And so what I have to offer as a state senator is someone whose focus and life experience is more like the everyday ordinary Californian who expects efficient and good services like roads and proper education. Married, I have 2 kids. I've spent a great deal of my time in community service. That's serving on different nonprofit boards. I spent a lot of time volunteering in my schools. I have owned and operated my own business, and the management of that gives me a certain perspective on the private sector and its economy. I'm a member of the Communication Workers of America, which makes me a union member, which means labor is very important to me in working families, etc. As a three-term trustee, I know a lot about education, and like to think that I was helpful in the implementation of the local control funding formula plan and the implementation of our new accountability plan as well. And certainly education is a major priority when it comes to improving our economy by training our workforce. So with that life experience, I will bring in an independent and fair and reasonable approach to legislation in Sacramento.
Thank you. For this next question, we'll start with Mike. So in 1978, the State Chamber of Commerce opposed Proposition 13 because it dreaded the property tax split roll of residential and commercial properties. So now, 36 years later, there is talk of just that. What do you think about splitting the property tax rolls?
Thank you so much, Laurie. So Prop 13 is a very important issue for the state of California, and of course, residents and business owners all throughout this great state. There would be a focus area where I think the legislature can move forward. First of all, I do not think that the legislature should touch the residential Prop 13 value. I think it needs to remain status quo. There are loopholes within Prop 13, and one in particular where I think that we can close. When a large corporation purchases another corporation, if they create subsidiaries, they can keep the Prop 13 increment the same as when that previous corporation purchased it, potentially back in 1929. I do believe that we can amend that so that all folks throughout this state are paying their fair share. If I were to sell my home and I go and purchase another, I would need to be able to pay a higher tax increment. I do believe that a corporation that goes in and purchases, for example, a large swath of land, but breaks it up into subsidiaries to try to hit that loophole should be closed. And that would be a priority of mine as a member of the state legislature.
Thank you. Lawrence?
Well, I remember Prop 13 very well. My party, Republican Party, told me there was no way that I was going to be able to get that passed. There was no way that sufficient people were going to sign that initiative in order to put it into play. But at the same time, we were having senior citizens who were losing their homes because they couldn't pay the property tax on those homes. So we had a situation that was very bad, and we were able to overcome that situation by keeping property tax in check. At that time, we had tremendous expansion in the value of homes, and property taxes were going up disproportionate to all reasonable economics in our state. And it passed with flying colors. Now, if we start to work to chip away at 13, the problem we're going to have is that it's all going to be chipped away. It's just like the GAN initiative that I spoke to earlier. When it was in effect, it was a good check on the administration of the state and its budget. But when they gutted it, then it was no longer effective. Prop 13 had its place and has its place in the tax structure in the state of California, and we should maintain it. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek?
Proposition 13 was a response to a similar symptom that we are having today, where special interests in Sacramento and government on autopilot and its interest in protecting and promoting and perpetuating its own self over the needs of individuals and their ability to stay in their homes and their standard of living. So as a result, the people passed Prop 13 as a way to protect themselves from overtaxation and excessive government. There is an issue around fairness on the commercial side of this issue, but I wouldn't touch Proposition 13. I think it's too important to too many people and too many residents, and it's in the best interest of most Californians. I would, however, work to enforce the laws that we do have when corporations or individuals seek to cheat or game the system to their advantage by creating independent trusts, which are not legislation that was passed for the intent of protecting families and their ability to hand farms and businesses down to their families. It wasn't put in place to protect corporate ownership. and to benefit individuals along those lines. The most I would do if some legislation was required on the commercial side would be to do what I could to strengthen the state's ability to close those loopholes, to make sure that corporations were competing on the same playing field as everyone else. It certainly isn't fair, competitive-wise, when small businesses who cannot afford these expensive trusts and gimmicks to get out of paying taxes and large corporations can. So I would look to level the playing field for business in California.
Thank you, Derek. Harry?
What comes to my mind right now is a couple of jobs that were offered by the Marin County Parks Department, and I'm going to estimate 5 months ago. I wrote a letter about it, and these were jobs that required diligent people because they were to add 2 volunteer coordinators to the Department of Parks. And I would think that that would take somebody at kind of a paralegal level of skill, a hardworking, skilled job, and you'd think that a thing like that should pay well, maybe $65,000 a year and some benefits. I could really see it was a valuable job, and except that the job was offered at $124,000 a year, which is just completely wrong. It's just too much, and the benefits package on top of it. So my position on Proposition 13 and changing it, there is a commercial issue. I don't mind looking at it, but these people have to put their house in order. The state government is completely out of control in terms of expenditures. The regional governments are just unreasonable in the amount of money that they're sucking, ABAG particularly. Not as a governance structure, which technically it's not, but it gets quite a bit, MTC. I would say that this government needs to put its house in order before it starts taking more money from people. If we see that happening, particularly on the pension side, then there's a commercial issue. Perhaps that can be addressed, but I'm not sympathetic to it until I see these people put their house in order, which is certainly not.
Thank you. We'll start with Lawrence for our next question. You've all touched on this a bit, but overall, how healthy do you consider the state's economy to be? And are there additional measures that you feel should be taken?
How healthy is the state's economy? That's a great question. I think just last week we heard that Toyota Motors is leaving the state of California. Torrance will lose them, and they have been there since 1957. So a long time. They had about 15,000 employees down there, and it's I think it is the largest automobile company in the nation today. And it's leaving the state of California, and it's taking, of course, all its executives with it, and it's headed to where? To the Big D in Texas. And just recently, in I think it was February, we heard that Occidental Petroleum, probably the largest corporation in Los Angeles, at least it has the tallest building, I think, in LA, left the state also. And where is it going? It's going to Houston, Texas. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we can't lose companies and people and expect that the state will do well. The state depends on business in order to generate profits and jobs. You take the profits and you take the jobs away, you take state revenue away. And we're in a terrible situation. We need to become business friendly. Not that we'll sell out to business, but at least be on a par with Texas. We had Amy's Kitchen in Mike's County. They were thinking about expanding in Sonoma County. Too expensive. Where did they move? New York. We can't do that. We need to keep our people here. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek?
I think the economy is the #1 issue facing California. The unemployment rate is still higher than the national average, and if it weren't for states like North Dakota and Texas, I think the rest of the country's employment rate would continue to be a lot higher than it is. From my perspective, this is another symptom of Sacramento focusing on the special interest groups who primarily benefit from state spending, rather than creating legislation that creates equal opportunity and incentive for small businesses to invest. Now, small businesses, if they had money and they had an element of certainty, they would invest more and they would hire more people. With the uncertainty comes long-term growth and job growth. And then we're talking about the kinds of jobs that aren't working at the mall or Target or Walmart. We're talking about jobs people can build a career on and raise a family and work to own a home. So job creation and the economy is the #1 focus, and my approach would essentially be to focus on more certainty in business, deregulating or creating incentives that would allow small businesses to grow and employ more people in our state.
Thank you.
Well, I am, unlike Lawrence, I'm not a Republican, but as it happens, I agree with what Lawrence just said. We are choked by regulation in this state. I have a friend, Tommy, in Nevada, who's a lawyer. We went to high school together. And he has a client, and the client just bought a small business property downtown on Grant Avenue in Nevada, where we live. And he wants to add 2 housing units to the top. And housing's a priority, so I would think that that would be a good thing. So the question is, what was the regulatory cost, the fee cost for him to do that? Fee cost was, $130,000 in development fees. This is insane. The development fees should be an amount that reasonably compensates the governmental entity involved for what it costs to do the inspections, et cetera, necessary for the approval of the business. But that's not what's happening. They have extremely excessive, intrusive, privacy-violating policies because they're spending vastly too much. That has to be stopped. And unless it's stopped, it will have more Toyota-type losses, and that's a huge loss, and it's coming directly because of the fact that the state is excessively regulating. It just needs to be cut in that regard.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Laurie. So there are 2 approaches to this. One, I'd like to be able to talk about the state budget because that impacts our economy, as well as economic initiatives. Starting out with the state budget, one, the state is planning looking at about a $10 to $15 billion surplus this coming fiscal year. I think we need to be able to pay down our bond debt that we've accrued since the start of the recession. 2, we need to rebuild our rainy day fund and support the governor's initiative coming forward this November. 3, we need to focus on pension debt. And then 4, we need to reinvest what we have left over from that surplus into our public schools as well as health and human services. On the jobs front, 85% of businesses across this incredible district, and it's about 90% here in the county of Marin, businesses have 15 employees or less. We need to bring forward tax credits for small businesses when it comes to hiring. We need to increase the sales tax credit when it comes to purchasing of large equipment from 4% to 6%. We need to lower the cost it takes to be able to start up a business. $800 here in the state of California every year, $99 in the state of Nevada. We need to make sure that we are competitive with the state of Nevada. And we also have to focus on infrastructure. We need to widen the Marin-Sonoma Narrows. I have been very focused as a member of the County of Sonoma's Board of Supervisors on this issue, to public transportation and rural broadband, particularly for West Marin. We take advantage. If you do not have high-speed internet, you're in trouble with your business, local school, and healthcare institution.
Thank you. So let's talk about schools. And we're going to start with Derek for this one. Does California still rank near the bottom in the low 40s in K through 12 school funding? Why isn't it near the top as it once was?
California does rank rather low when it comes to per pupil spending, and I would like to see that amount increased, but with the caveat and within the reason of being more efficient. Education needs to transform itself to be more in line with the internet, technology, world trade, and the level of competition and how people are learning today with the use of online classes, etc. Businesses are looking for individuals who have skills along these lines, and so the schools need to focus more on teaching kids on how to be problem solvers, which is what Common Core is doing. I think it's important to note that the education is one of the bright spots within California, because we have adjusted our funding formula to give local school boards and local communities more control over the spending. And in addition to the control of the spending, they have local accountability plans that they have to put forward and be met. So local communities are going to be able to judge their local schools and have more input that is less regulated or categorically controlled by the state legislature. I think this is something that could be used throughout the state when it comes to many issues along the land use, for instance, our judicial system. If we were to relinquish more control to local communities, I think money would be spent more efficient. I think there'd be more investment in the future.
Thank you. Harry?
Well, first let me address what was just said about Common Core. If you try and ask 3 teachers what Common Core means, and you're going to get 3 different answers, because it's essentially a propagandistically enabled process that's greatly to the benefit of textbook publishers. I think that we really need to be very careful in the extent to which we start or continue to adopt these mass visionary processes about education. I think that we need to focus on the need for people to have fundamental basic skills such as multiplication and division. We need to equip them with the ability to solve problems. But talking about education, I would first comes to my mind a letter of February 2013 by Dr. Martha Herbert of the Harvard University School of Medicine, a practicing doctor at Massachusetts General Hospital in pediatric neurology, in which letter, which you can find on the internet, Martha Herbert, she talks about the damage that's being done to students by Wi-Fi. And I realize that that's something that most of you don't understand is a serious issue in terms of a serious peer-reviewed issue. But if you were to look at the International Journal of Oncology, for example, the September 2013 edition, the Hardell study, the meta study that Dr. Herbert references in her work, you're going to see that Wi-Fi in the classroom is a terrible risk immunologically, in terms of DNA modification. Look on YouTube at the work of Dr. Ole Johansson of the Karolinska Institute, Stockholm. I guess that's my time's up, but take that one seriously.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. For me, there is no greater investment than what we can make in our kids in our public schools. I agree, additional funding doesn't solve everything. There are always greater efficiencies in areas that we can focus when it comes to becoming more effective. But I think the numbers speak for themselves when it comes to our priorities in the state of California. We are 49th out of 50 when it comes to per pupil spending. We're right behind Mississippi when it comes to spending on our K-12 public school students. This is embarrassing. We spend between $6,400 and $6,800 per year. New Jersey is over $13,000 per year. And you take a look at how effective they've been in their public schools, it's night and day with the state of California. We're 50 out of 50 when it comes to spending on counselors, 50 out of 50 when it comes to spending on librarians. I support local control. We need to make sure that local school board members have the resources they need without the strings attached to educate their kids. And the other area I think we need to focus in on as a state and in Marin County is renewing Prop 30. Prop 30 was the quarter-cent sales tax that all of us are paying. It's about a 6-year sunset to it. And the richest 1% pay additional dollars towards public education. Prop 30 won't even get us to the middle of the pack when it comes to education spending throughout this nation. And I believe we also have to focus on career technology education. 72% of public high school graduates throughout this district, it's a little lower here in Marin, will not go on to a 4-year degree. We also have to focus on career skills and job skills as well in our public high schools.
Thank you. Lawrence?
First, I'd like to address the issue of a surplus. If you look at the controller's website, the State of California Controller Chang, you'll see that in the first 8 months of this year, the general fund receipts are $14 billion behind the expenses. Now, you can't have a balanced budget when you're spending more than you're receiving. And here, this will feed right into this discussion we're having on education. If you're spending money for things that are not necessary, you're depriving education of the funds you could provide it. That's not to say, though, that by spending money, all issues will be solved. Money is not the root of success. Money can choke success. What we need to do is we need to think about things that we can do to change the results that we get from education. If we are teaching our kids not to multiply, they don't know what 3 times 3 is, that's a bad thing. I don't care what you're doing in the classroom. How are you going to divide in the 4th grade if you don't know how to multiply in the 3rd grade? And you can't tell me that's good. And you can't tell me that dropping cursive from the curriculum is a proper thing to do. It's an improper thing to do. We're regressing in education in many aspects, and we need to stop the regression.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with Harry this time. So 2 years ago, we asked candidates about the state's pension system. Is this still a worrisome area?
The state's pension system is not only worrisome from the standpoint of dollars and the mystery accounting, which has been so often associated with those estimates, it's also an area of great concern as to what is occurring politically. Here in Marin, when Carrie Mazzoni was running for the San Rafael area district for the Board of Supervisors against the incumbent Susan Adams, at the very last of the campaign, I would say in the last month or 5 weeks, something like that, Ms. Adams received from union sources $135,000 in new campaign money. Carrie was running a grassroots sort of a campaign, and she very narrowly lost. I have been present, I was during that campaign as one of Carrie's supporters, present when both of them were asked about the pension issues, and Carrie said we've got to bring them all together to recognize that everyone's got something at stake in the success of this system and something to lose if it goes down. My position and recollection is Ms. Adams was willing to take the position that the state could come to the rescue. That's a paraphrase, not an exact quote. We have a problem here where the Service Employees International Union is now owning lock, stock, and barrel the Democratic Party of California, and then repetitively installing politicians who are willing to see that the pension benefits keep going up. As a result, we have unsustainable pensions. We need to go to a defined contribution plan.
We'll let you address it in another question. Thank you. Mike?
Thank you so much. Yes, it is absolutely still a significant concern and a priority of mine if elected to this position. And I think that the best track record is when you look at an individual's history, because it means they're going to be focused on that same issue into the future. I'm the only one in this race that has brought forward pension reform. When I took office in the depths of the recession in the county of Sonoma, I inherited a significant pension liability. And when I was running for the Board of Supervisors, I said that it would be among my top priorities, and it continues to be. I brought all sides together, along with the other members of the Board of Supervisors, business, employees, management, neighbors, to be able to tackle this significant liability. Rightfully so, the top paid in the organization took the most, and we have brought forward over $170 million in historic pension reform agreements. That $170 million will be reinvested into core services like roads and bridges and parks and health and human service programming. And I'm going to be doing the same at the state. We need a representative that is going to be able to work with business and employees in the community to bring us together to solve this significant financial issue, and I'm committed to it.
Thank you. Lawrence?
The state's pension problem is a monster. No one really, I've asked a number of people who should know what it is, and they have no idea. I've heard numbers anywhere from $500 billion to $1 trillion unfunded throughout the state of California. Now, and I've heard, like for Los Angeles, I've heard somebody, they wrote in the Investor Business Daily, a financial newspaper of record, and said that they estimated that the city's unfunded pension liability is $100 billion. Now there's roughly 40 million people in the state of California. So if every one of us were to give $1, we could get LA out of about $40 million worth of debt. But we're talking billions. It would take about $1,000, right? 1,000 times a million is a billion. Take about $1,000 per person in order to get the Los Angeles $40 billion. In order to get them fully funded, it would take every one of us in the state of California to write a check to the city of Los Angeles of $2,500. That, ladies and gentlemen, is never going to happen. And that's only the city of Los Angeles. That's not the state of California. So if this number is $500 billion, do you know how much all of us owe? Tens of thousands of dollars each. What are we going to do, ladies and gentlemen? The first thing we can't do is continue to let it get worse.
Thank you so much. And Derek?
Pensions is a serious issue. First of all, we don't want to do anything that's catastrophic and too rushed, and certainly we want to be able to pay people enough while they're working so they can retire. That just makes common sense, and we need to do what's fair and reasonable for everyone. But what's important is I think people need to understand, who aren't part of the public sector pension system, how it affects them. Essentially, the system we have in place now, we cannot just put more money into it. It's simply unaffordable. The employees can't afford it, the employers can't afford it, and the taxpayers can't afford it. So we have to change the system and how we do it. And you have to understand that paying off this debt and the competition for these dollars at the government level is what causes, it competes for the money that should be going into education and the repair of our roads and the services that you deserve and what you expect when you pay taxes. Ultimately, we need to transform the system into something that is more reflective of the private sector, and that would be a system where it had defined contributions and not defined distributions later in life. I think that, again, the best way to solve this problem is to pass legislation that will give local governments, localities, in different districts and boards of education the ability to renegotiate their pension systems with their employees. Currently, due to a recent Supreme Court ruling, the California Supreme Court ruling, it's called the California rule, makes it illegal for your local city council or school boards to renegotiate these contracts with their labor groups. And that's something that we need to correct, and if I go to Sacramento, I will make this an issue.
Thank you, Derek. Okay, Mike. Water, or the lack of it, became the top issue in 2013 and 2014. So what does the state need to do in response to that?
No, absolutely. I'd like to be able to take a statewide view and then focus in and also locally. And I would respectfully challenge my fellow candidates to oppose the Delta Tunnel project. This project would steal Northern California's water supply to help expand Los Angeles sprawl and bring unreversible harm to Northern California's environment. I have a plan, which I'd like to be able to talk with you about, to be able to provide Central Valley farmers, those that are the nation's breadbasket, with the water they need, with the site's reservoir. But I think water reliability starts here at home. I'm the vice chair of the EO Russian River Commission. I sit on the board of directors that delivers water to 600,000 Marin and Sonoma County residents every day. And here's where I would focus when it comes to water reliability here at home. One is we need to raise Coyote Dam at Lake Mendocino to ensure that the Russian River, 25% of all of Marin County's water comes from Russian River, 80% in the city of Novato. We need to make sure that we raise Coyote Dam. That would double the capacity in Lake Mendocino. Two, I think that we need to move forward with the site's reservoir east of Lake County that would be able to provide the Central Valley with the water they need. And then three, we need to be able to focus on conservation measures, not just here in Northern California, but I think Southern California and Los Angeles needs to step up on their conservation measures. And then four, finally, we need to work with our ag community to be able to provide more flexible legislation that would allow them with additional ag storage ponds and to be able to capture additional peak flow during peak storm events.
Thank you. Lawrence.
Water is an issue, and you have to look at the record here again. You have to reflect and go back and what has California been doing for the last 50 years and storage facilities in California. You'll find out there's been a dearth, okay? Nothing's been done. We developed, and I think we spent as taxpayers an amount approaching, if not exceeding, $300 million in the development of the Auburn Dam. Ladies and gentlemen, we reconstructed highways. We did clearing work. I'm sure we bought land for that purpose. Yet there stands no dam there in Auburn. Why don't we build out the Auburn Dam? Now, I understand it'll have an effect on the American River, but the good effect is it has on you, supplying you with water that you need to drink, water that you need to bathe, water that farmers need in order to grow crops. And it also prevents floodwaters from intruding on Sacramento. My understanding is it provides Sacramento with 450-year flood protection. That's reasonable. Let's be reasonable, ladies and gentlemen. The state's population has doubled, and we haven't done anything about making available to that population adequate water supplies. Let's correct that problem.
Thank you. Derek?
An adequate and reliable water supply is essential to California's economic vitality and job creation. Our statewide water system supplies all the water to its residents and its businesses, and it's in urgent need of restoration and repair and upgrade. It's an aging infrastructure that needs to keep up with population growth and deal with the frequent droughts that we're having. As a legislator, as your state senator, I'll be working with Governor Brown and the federal government to finish implementing the environmentally workable and technically practical solution put together in what was called the Comprehensive Water Package legislation of 2009 to address the deteriorating situation in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. We need to push past the delaying restudy tactics and the special interest groups that are currently benefiting from the status quo, and we need to be supportive of the Safe, Clean, and Reliable Drinking Water Act bond, which is scheduled to be on the November ballot. This bond is going to help fund the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, along with many other important projects throughout Northern and Southern California. And as state senator, I see the entire state and its economy and its need for water as something that's very important and that will benefit all of us.
Thank you. Marin?
Well, I just heard one of our candidates, Mike McGuire, challenge the other candidates to take a position on the Delta Tunnel. And I accept that challenge, and I agree with Mike. It shouldn't be built. Yeah, I agree with Mike on that it is a taking away inappropriately of Northern California's water, and I absolutely agree that conservation, including by water bill adjustment, needs to be imposed in Southern California. Also, Coyote Dam should be raised, the Sites Reservoir should be constructed, and I don't know what to say about the Auburn Dam, but I'll tell you, I have been engaged in litigation pertaining to the considerable large-scale litigation, expensive litigation as it turned out for the state, pertaining to the February 20th, 1986 flood event. And you know, flood control is really an important part of what we do, and that should be looked at. I would also like to say something that's a little bit controversial in some people's minds, but they certainly should look at the hard scientific fact when we're talking about water. If you look at the statement that I have made in the ballot statement here in Marin County and in Sonoma County, you'll find my quoting a particular Harvard University study with regard to the negative effects of fluoridation of drinking water. I think that's a genuine and serious issue. And finally, if we're concerned about water quality, that's one other good reason to not allow fracking. The whole concept of fracking along our San Andreas Fault is just insane.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question. Okay, we're going to start with Lawrence on this one. So it seems like that there's been a lot of outrage in Marin about having regional agencies tell municipal governments what to do, particularly around housing. Are they right to be angry about it, and how do you see this all unfolding?
Absolutely. If you recall, the person I was running against in the last race drew up the legislation that started this whole monstrous situation here in Marin County, AB 32, by Noreen Evans. And then she went on to support SB 375. So what we have now is we've abdicated our control of housing and have put it in the hands of a group of people who we do not have direct contact to. And as a result of that, we have WinCup. We have them looking at expanding and concentrating, 700 units in Larkspur Landing? So we see a development process that's out of control, out of local control. It should raise the anger of the people in Marin County, but it's who you send to the Senate, who you send to the Assembly, that will allow for such things to be imposed upon you. We need to send and we need to select better candidates to go to Sacramento. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Derek?
I believe it's logical to generate a regional plan that addresses urban sprawl and encourages residential growth along and near transportation corridors. However, this is another clear example of how special interest groups can step in and usurp a process to their advantage in total disregard for the people who are going to be impacted the most. Much of the consternation over the recent adoption of ABAG policy plans is the result of them accepting biased information, demographic information, and allowing and the lack of our elected local leaders who sit on those committees to see the obfuscation that was put forward when they approved the plan to begin with. On the short term, I would support the current legislation, AB 1537, which would help to redesignate Marin County from a metropolitan area to a suburban area. But from a long-term perspective, I think that ABAG needs to be transformed completely into something that looks more like the reapportionment committee that set up our different districts throughout the state, one that was independently put together and operated. And I would have that entity synchronized with the 8-year general plans that counties are required to have along the lines of land use. So I would seek transformation of the system, and would definitely want everyone to understand that I'd be interested in representing their interests, the people who live in the neighborhoods that would be infected the most by these plans.
Thank you. Harry?
I think that we have a repetitive situation here of people who go through college and specialize in something as I did in public administration, where you're taught to be a city manager and you're gaining those skills, and then they go into an internship and they work as a planner 2 perhaps, and a planner 1, and then an assistant city manager, then a city manager, and they're part of that whole administrative structure, the 4th branch of government, and then they proceed in their careers therein. The problem is that they've never been out in the private sector having to make a payroll, which I have done now for close to 40 years. And so they lack practical experience. And so now we have sort of a new corporatocracy, in a sense, as part of it. But we have a new feudalism where the barons are now people holding positions of administrative responsibility. I kept out of politics for 40 years, and what brought me back into it was, as the founder of Citizens for Balanced Housing in Novato, was after reading an article in the July-August 2008 edition of Atlantic on housing, which I recommend to you. It's called An American Murder Mystery, suggested by my closest friend who's a police officer in the city. You know, I really studied this issue, and first, it's a tax dodge. It's a huge tax dodge for developers. It's too complex to get into in 30 seconds, but trust me, that's the case. Secondly, I oppose Plan Bay Area. Third, ABAG's out of control, and they're, in my view, acting unconstitutionally. I would like to see ABAG abolished. And to say that it's logical to cluster, as Derek Knell just said, well, it's not scientifically logical, because there's no science at all to support the contention that that's going to result in some global warming bonanza.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. You know, I share the frustration that regarding regional governments. As a small town mayor in the city of Healdsburg, I remember when we were given our allotment for affordable housing, And those individuals that provided that mandate never set foot into the community in which they're imposing that mandate on. And that has greatly impacted Marin County, particularly since so many of our small communities have reached build out. So here's where I'd like to be able to focus. One is I do support Assemblymember Levine's legislation that would change Marin County's designation from urban to suburban. So what that would mean is that rather than building out 30 units per acre, it would go down to 20 units per acre. Here's why I think that makes sense. Marin County has a little over 250,000 folks living within its borders. Sonoma County has double that, and they're a suburban county. It makes sense to be able to make that change in designation. Two, I think that we should also focus on affordable housing stock. So right now, the state only provides communities with 25% credit if you transition a market unit to affordable unit. It should be 100% credit. If we're serious about affordable housing, then we should go from 25 to 100%. I think the other area that I'd focus in on is bringing members of the state Senate out to Marin County so that they can see firsthand the constraints that communities have so that they understand where Marin County is coming from when it comes to these mandates from the regional governments.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That ends the questions. Before the candidates make their closing statements, I want to give you some important dates. Election Day is Tuesday, June 3rd. The last day to register to vote is May 19th, 2 weeks before the election, or if you want to re-register, if you've moved since you last voted. Requests for absentee ballots must be received by the Elections Department by May 27th, 1 week before the election. Early voting opens at the Civic Center, room 121 on May 6th. If you go to the League's smartvoter.org website and enter your street address and zip code, you will be able to see your own ballot with links to the candidates, issues, ballot measures, and information about the voting process itself. In addition, our website, marinlwv.org, has many other online resources for voters to research facts and campaign financial information. Now the candidates will make their closing statements of 90 seconds each, and we'll start with Mike McGuire, work our way around.
Thank you so much. Great job today. And I want to thank these incredible candidates who are here as well. Thank the League of Women Voters along with Marin TV. I know that we all greatly appreciate the hard work that went into this evening's broadcast. I'd like to be able to start out with a promise. My grandma, who helped raise me, heard no a lot in her life. And she taught me never to take no for an answer. No one will work harder for Marin County than I will. And I will never take no for an answer. I want to reinvest in our public schools. We have to return greatness and funding to our public schools. We need to protect our environment, ban fracking, as well as protect our coast and reopen our state parks. We need to move forward with a comprehensive small business strategy and bring jobs back, not just in Marin County, but throughout this district that goes all the way up to the Oregon border. We need to focus on infrastructure, water reliability, and policies that help protect us from the drought. And we need to deliver responsible budgets. I've been endorsed by the majority of the Novato City Council, including Mayor Lucan, Mayor Phillips, and the majority of the San Rafael City Council, the majority of the Marin County Board of Supervisors, Congressman Jared Huffman, retired Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey, the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce, the 101 Manufacturing Group, along with the Sierra Club. It's a broad coalition, and I'd be honored to earn your vote on June 3rd. And again, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this evening's broadcast.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the ladies as well at the League for allowing us to have this opportunity to discuss the issues before you. I like the fact that they're very objective questions they've asked us, and they have brought some great deal of understanding, I hope, to the public out there. Now it's up to you. You know, the discussions have been made. You've heard these people speak. You've heard all of us speak. And it's for you to decide where you want to go and who you think will take you there the best way. So I would just say, take the time, study our websites. Mine's at www.voteweisner.com, and the others have their websites up as well, I'm sure. But study those websites, study the issues, and make a very knowledgeable, concerned decision as to which way you want to see your district in the state of California to go. And thank you very much for taking the time, if you're out there. Thank you for taking the time to view this. And we depend on you. This is a democracy.
Thank you. Derek?
If a true democratic process is to be restored, voters must be presented with an independent candidate providing objective voices and not being beholden to special interest groups from either side of the political spectrum. Voters have a right to choose between candidates who are obligated to special interests or those who are independent and will represent the everyday interests of most Californians. Whether it's tax advantages for corporations looking to pull wealth out of California, or the autopilot growth of government protecting itself over the needs of its citizens, we need to stop the control that special interests and the political class have over our government. My approach is to focus on you and everyday Californians, the working families who want government to work for them. With your support, I'll go to Sacramento and I'll work for you and not for those who benefit directly for state spending. If you have questions, and if you'd like to know more about me and my campaign, please visit my website, DerekKnell.StateSenate.com. I want to thank you for your consideration and your vote. And I also want to thank the League of Women Voters again for this opportunity.
Thank you. Harry?
Well, our website, which is a family-produced process that is getting better by the day, I hope, is at Lehmann, Lehmann, for Senate.com. So please take a look. I have direct statements on 11 or 12 issues there so far, rather than dodging them in a Teflon sense. I've been facing up to them. I promise to be honorable. If I have the opportunity to represent you, I promise to be honest, and I promise to be honorable in my conduct. I'm going to do that whether I'm elected or not, but if I'm elected, I'll do it for you. Mr. McGuire is the establishment candidate. He represents the Democratic establishment. If that's what you want, and that really means a lot to you, then you vote for the establishment candidate. Mr. Knell says he's an independent, but I'm the only real independent in the room because I owe no political allegiance to any party. I do think that we should, one issue I didn't get to say, on the pension issue, I do think we should put a ceiling on pensions, maybe $120,000 per year, something like that with COLA, which is a huge amount. But these top-end pensions, these people make enough money they should save for themselves. We're not supposed to be giving them, life ever after happiness. They're adults. They should take care of themselves. I'd appreciate your vote. I'll serve honorably if elected. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you to all of our candidates and to Margie Ella for being our timekeeper. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.